So I begin by drawing 4 boxes, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now, the way that this box works is as follows, right? You have, and I'll actually change my color. In one half of the box, right? In one half of the box, we have the effort it takes to get something done, right? So this half is always going to be effort. And we'll just label it E. And we'll say that E is effort. Okay. On the other half, so what goes into the box is effort, and what comes out of the box is the benefit. So you can see that this is all win-win, right? What goes into the box is effort, what comes out of the box is benefit. And we'll say that B is benefit. Now, with respect to the problem of free riders, what we have to do is we need to conceptualize how this is understood. Before I begin, I'll just give a general assessment of how this works. Imagine, if you will, that you have 2 roommates, right? So there's 3 people that live in this condo or this apartment, right? 2 people make their contributions and pay their rent on time. The third person is always late with his rent. He pays his rent, but he pays it late, and he pays it late habitually. Insofar as he pays his late habitually, his response is always, hey, well, you know, I'm paying the rent. It's getting late, but at least I'm making the payment. And what the other people end up saying, his other 2 roommates end up saying is, hey, you're able to enjoy the light, the food, the cable, the air condition, a roof over your head, and you're not making contributions that we're making. I'm putting in my effort, the other roommate's putting in her effort, and you're sort of freeloading, right? And this is where the idea of free riding comes, right? You're receiving benefits for not having putting in any effort. So that's sort of how we make an assessment of a very rudimentary assessment of free riding. Free rider receives benefit without making any contributions to the game, right? We need to make sure that contributions have been made to the game. Insofar as contributions have been made, then you get benefit. If you haven't made any contributions to the game, then theoretically you're not supposed to get any benefit. But because our N is so high, it's invariable. It's likely that someone's going to be able to get benefit without making contributions. What we're trying to do now is make an assessment of all the different possibilities how this might manifest. And I'm going to give you just one person putting his or her own effort in and receiving a benefit just for him or herself, because it's much, much easier to discuss that than it is to discuss, an N of 350 million. All right. So the way that I construct this, and I'll use a different color, the way that I construct this is, unlike the last game in the Prisoner's Dilemma where I work from right to left, in the effort benefit, I typically work from left to right. So what I do is imagine that we have a very low effort, very low effort, very high effort, very high effort, right? So low, low, high, high. Then we'll work our way around. Imagine that we have very high, very low, very high. You can construct this anyway, right? But the way that I do it, just for sort of keeping this all in my head, is I construct it in this fashion. Okay, so imagine that I have very little bit of effort, but I get a very high benefit, right? And while I was preparing for this lecture last night, I tried to think of all the, very simple examples that I can give to make sense of this relationship. So something that has a very little bit of effort, but you get a very, very high benefit. And this will help us understand sort of this idea of collective action and collective benefit, and also free riding. And the example that I'm going to use is the orange tree, right? The orange tree. An orange tree takes relatively little effort to plant, right? You take a seed. I don't know how you plant an orange tree. It might be a branch or something, but let's just imagine you plant an orange tree with seeds. And I'm not an agriculturist, right? So I take an orange seed, I take a little shovel, I dig a little hole, I put the orange seed, especially if you live in Florida like I do, put the orange seed in the middle of the earth, I pat the dirt over, and then I'll walk away, right? My effort is very, very small. I haven't put a lot of effort into planting an orange tree, right? But the benefit is huge, right? Why is the benefit of planting an orange tree huge? Well, because the orange tree can feed many, many people for decades, right? If the tree's taken care of, it will produce thousands of oranges, right, and feed many, many people. So you can see that planting an orange tree is a good use of effort, right, because there's very little effort for a very high benefit. Okay, I want you to keep this in your head, because as we progress in the discussion and we start to talk about sustainability, we'll return, because this is actually where all this is going, is that we're going to talk about sort of incentivizing and how do we incorporate incentives into free riding, right? And as I said from the beginning, this lecture is a little bit more advanced, but I had some questions from viewers to go through the prisoner's dilemma. So I decided not just to do the prisoner's dilemma, to incorporate it into a grander picture, something contemporary that we can use, right? Okay, so now we look at the next example, right? Something that has very little effort, but there's very little benefit. Now remember, as I said before, just because the benefit is little doesn't mean that it's bad. Any benefit is a win, right? It's always win here, right? High benefit, win. Low benefit, win. It just doesn't have as high a benefit as others, right? And some of this may be subjective, but I'm trying to stick with the most, my examples I'm hoping are not subjective. And that's why I'm trying to stick with the most objective examples to make sense of this, right? So what requires very, very little effort and yields a very small benefit? And the idea that came to mind for me was giving a homeless person $1, right? So we'll call it donating $1. Right? I donate $1 to a homeless person on the side of the street. I stop at a red light. Somebody comes up, shakes a can, says, "Hey, do you have $1?" It doesn't really require a lot of effort on my part to go into my wallet and pull out $1, right? So I pull out the $1. I extend my hand. The homeless person takes the $1, and the homeless person has $1. But the question is, what can you really do with $1? Well, not much, right? I can't really do much with $1. So the person gets this $1, and I mean, you might be able to buy a cup of coffee, and I don't even know that you can buy a cup of coffee with $1. But let's just imagine you can buy a cup of coffee for $1, right? I've exerted very, very little effort. The homeless person has received small benefit, not a huge benefit, but they've received a benefit. So in the example of little effort, little benefit, donating $1 is a good example of sort of this exchange. Now we move, and I'm going to divide the board into two sections, right? We have things which are very low effort, and now things which have very high effort, right? Something that requires a lot of time, a lot of effort. And what I'm going to do in this next section actually I'll wait because I want to jump the gun. Okay, so something that requires a lot of effort but yields low benefit, right? This is going to be problematic, right? This is going to be very problematic. If something requires a lot of effort but the benefit is very, very low, then cognitively, especially if we're talking about collective action, right? A group of people are going to be less willing to participate in an action that requires an exorbitant amount of effort but yields very, very little benefit, right? I don't mind doing something if the effort is small. When the effort becomes bigger, right, I definitely don't want to participate in an action that requires a lot of effort but yields low benefit. So I was trying to be objective as possible and think of the best example. And the example that I came up with is caulking. Caulking. Alright, so imagine that you live in, let's say, a flood zone. You live in Louisiana, you live in Florida, you live in parts of Texas, and flooding can become, you live on the banks of the Mississippi, flooding can be a problem. And you don't want your house to get flooded. So what you're going to do is you're going to spend the entire day with a caulking gun, and you're going to waterproof the baseboards, right? So you go around and you waterproof the baseboards of your home, right? Waterproofing the baseboards of your home can take all day, right? And you're on your knees, right? And you're going around caulking the entire house. There's a huge amount of effort that is required in waterproofing the baseboards of your house. You don't want anything to seep in, so you want to waterproof all of that. The benefit is relatively small. It's not like I'm going to be able to see the effort of my labor materialized in anything, right? It looks exactly the way it looked when I began.